Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me again for another Instagram Live. Haven't done one in a while, but I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by an expert in her field tonight for what I think is going to be a really interesting and important chat for a lot of pregnant women and women trying to conceive. Tonight I'm going to be joined by the brilliant Melanie McGrice, who is an advanced accredited practicing dietitian who has a master's degree in dietetics. And Melanie was in fact named Australian Dietitian of the Year in 2018. She has an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise in the area of pregnancy. And I, in my daily practice, get so many questions about food and nutrition in the sort of periconceptual period and right throughout the pregnancy journey that I thought it'd be really brilliant to be joined by Melanie tonight. So I'm going to see if I can get Melanie to join us. It's not there just quite yet. Sorry about this. There we go. Won't be long now.
Hello.
Hello, Melanie.
Excellent.
Twice in one day.
I know. Lucky me.
Absolutely. Me too. How's the rest of your day been? Not too bad?
No, it's been a great day. Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Your little one's in bed now?
She is. So hopefully she stays there.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Mine too. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've had a huge number of questions from our followers who have a lot to learn tonight from you, which is really wonderful. And there's a lot to cover, and I hope we can get through it all tonight. But while I was sort of preparing the questions for this evening, I wondered if perhaps we might need to do this in two parts. But let's see how we go tonight, and we'll get through as much as we can. So, Melanie, you've obviously got a huge amount of experience in the area of nutrition and dietetics related to pregnancy. And I'm sure you get these questions all the time, as do I in my practice every single day. And to be honest, a lot of them I can answer to some degree, but when things get a little bit more detailed or complicated, I always refer to a dietitian. And a lot of it starts sort of very early on in the pregnancy, or even before women are pregnant, and they always want to know from me which pregnancy multivitamin is best, or what combination of vitamins and supplements should I be on. So what's your advice to women either trying to get pregnant or early in their pregnancy about what the optimal combination of vitamins is?
Yeah, well, I actually never recommend the same combination to any one of my clients.
Yeah.
It's different for everyone. So if I'm seeing a client personally, what I do is we do a nutrition assessment, which is a lot like your first assessment as well, where we go through and we look at people's medical history, their family histories. Disappeared for a second. Of both them and their and the baby's dad. We look at physical activity they're doing, their weight, their blood test results, and then of course their dietary intake. So have a look at all of those things, and then that gives me a good idea of what nutrients they're going to need additional amounts of, and what nutrients they're going to have gaps. They're having gaps of in their diet, so they might need a little bit of a boost in that area. And so based upon that whole combination, I'll individually tailor a supplement regime for them.
Fantastic. Excellent. And sort of obviously I always talk to my patients about needing folate for prevention of neural tube defects, the importance of iodine in terms of sort of thyroid and neurological development in the baby. Are there any other sort of vitamins that you think all pregnant women should be on, or again, is it very much an individualized sort of scenario for you?
Yeah, so when it comes to the actual Australian guidelines, folate and iodine are the two that are recommended as part of the Australian guidelines.
Yeah.
My baby
sorry, my friend.
Oh, sorry, everybody.
I know it's not mine, so I presumed it must be yours.
She's just like, who is she talking to this time?
Absolutely.
Why am I part of this conversation?
She can join us if she wants.
I need to. Sorry, we'll see how we go.
That's all right.
So folate and iodine. With folate or folic acid, I think the first thing that's a really good thing to point out is that different women need different amounts. And you obviously know this, but I think a lot of women out there don't realise that. And so for a whole range of reasons, everything from being a little bit overweight or carrying excess body weight, diabetes, smoking, different medications that you're on, different things like that can impact upon your folic acid requirements. Sorry, I'm going to have to go and get a...
Go for it, my friend. I understand.
2 seconds and,
easy.
Thank you.
Completely understand. Won't be too long. Got lots of great questions tonight for Melanie that a lot of you have asked. And as I said, hopefully we'll manage to get through as many of them as possible. But there are a huge number of questions, and I think this is a discussion that could potentially take hours. So we'll see what we get through, and whatever we don't, we'll try and schedule another session down the track. Hello.
Hello, Scott.
Who's this?
This is Grace.
Hello, hi, Grace.
Who was sound asleep, but
we interrupted the evening
to join the party. So anyway,
definitely. Well, if you need to go, just let us know. We completely understand.
Thank you. And so then the other thing is with iodine. So some people with thyroid conditions may need not need iodine. They may actually need to avoid it. So they're the two standard ones. But then there are actually a gazillion different nutrients that we look at when it comes to pregnancy supplements. Everything from choline to iron to B12. It's quite a long list.
Absolutely, not a problem at all. The next sort of question I get, which often starts early on in a pregnancy, is how much weight should I gain during pregnancy? And you know, I can think of a number of women I've seen in the last sort of 48 hours who've said, oh, I think I've only put on 1 kilo or 2 in the first trimester. Others say I've put on 4 to 5. Do I need to worry about that? So how much weight should a woman gain during a pregnancy? Does it change with each trimester? And then I'm going to take you into another part of the question briefly, which is, should it be different for women carrying a singleton pregnancy versus those carrying a twin or multiple pregnancy?
So I'll answer that part first, and then so yes, absolutely. If you are having twins or a multiple pregnancy, then yes, you're going to need to gain more weight, and you're also going to need to gain that weight much faster. Yes, because when you're having multiples, usually my understanding is that usually you deliver earlier, and so we actually want to be trying to get that weight on much faster so that the babies are of a healthy weight when they're born at that early stage. It's interesting in general, and obviously this is very much of a generalization, but in general, a lot of my mums who are having single babies are working on maintaining a healthy weight throughout their pregnancy, whereas with my twin and multiple mums, where I'm trying to find every possible place to add in additional calories to help them to actually gain enough weight. So definitely, they're very different clients.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of weight gain, so again, so it varies quite significantly depending upon your preconception BMI, so or weight versus your height.
Absolutely.
So if you have a healthy weight when you're commencing pregnancy, so a healthy BMI, according to the guidelines, then we're aiming for 11.5 to 16 kilograms throughout your pregnancy in total. But ideally, we're looking for a maximum of 2 kilos of weight gain in the first trimester. Because when you think about it, your baby at the end of the first trimester is still only tiny. We're usually about the size of a plum. And so that weight gain in the first trimester is not baby weight, but it's usually more so fluid. And so even my mums who who we don't want to gain very much weight during pregnancy, I find that they will still sometimes gain a couple of kilograms during that first trimester just of fluid, which can be really hard not to put on.
Definitely.
And it is, it's probably in many ways the most important trimester to be managing your weight, because the research tends to suggest that weight gain that has been gained during that first trimester is usually fat, if it's not that fluid, that couple of kilos of fluid. And so that can become harder to get off later. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so gaining that 11.5 to 16 kilos, then that works out at around about, on average, 300 grams a week throughout the second and third trimesters. But saying that, there's a lot of fluctuation, and I do always recommend that women don't weigh in any more than a maximum of once a week. Usually more like once a month is probably a good idea, and you have to allow for some fluctuations. So there is good research to suggest that women who know what their pregnancy target weight is are more likely to achieve that weight. So I do think it's a good idea to have a general guide of what you're heading towards. But at the same time, you don't want to stress about it.
Definitely. And another question that I've had a couple of times sort of over the past 12 months is from women who have a slightly higher BMI to start with, who ask me if it's safe to lose weight in pregnancy. What's your sort of take on that scenario?
Yeah. So I believe that it is, if it's done so very carefully under the guidance of both dietitian and obstetrician who's supportive of it.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that you're still meeting all of your nutrition requirements. So that's why you need the dietitian involvement. And you need to make sure that your baby is still growing at a healthy rate, which is why you need the dietitian involvement. So.
Perfect. Same answer I give all the time. So glad we're on the same page there. Now, moving on to sort of about specific foods that can and can't be eaten in pregnancy, because obviously this is what everyone wants to know. And a lot of people are, you know, devastated that they can't eat their favorite foods during pregnancy a lot of the time. So how do you sort of guide women as to understanding what they can't eat in their pregnancy diet? And are there ways that those foods can be modified a little bit so that they are able to be eaten safely? For example, can you heat up soft cheeses and cured meats so that they're piping hot, and then are they safe? But this is something I get all the time because, as I say, a lot of people are very disappointed when they find that their long-standing favourite foods are no longer on the menu.
Yeah. So yes, you absolutely can heat. So if we're talking about not eating foods because of listeria, then the food hygiene perspective is the most important. So I think a lot of people are very black and white about can't eat that. But at the end of the day, we need to remember that listeria is a bacteria that is on pretty much every food, and it grows more prolifically, can't get the word out, in particular environments. So like any bacteria does. And so if a food is in the environment that's nice and just warm and cozy and moist, then it's going to grow like crazy. Whereas if it's cooked to over 65 degrees, then that's really going to hold off any growth and hopefully kill some of it off as well. So that's where having those brie and camemberts and ham and so forth, if you are cooking it and it's steaming hot, then yes, it is fine to eat. So I think particularly in Australia, where we generally have great food hygiene, the biggest risk is really that food hygiene, making sure that you aren't taking any risks. Like, make sure that you're not eating food that is dubious, that's been sitting in the fridge for a couple of days. Like during pregnancy, you need to be really careful about those types of things, whereas otherwise you may not. But you know, we've all heard about scares like the rockmelon scare that we had a couple of years ago. Rockmelon wasn't on the list of foods that you couldn't eat prior to that scare. And I think people don't realize that listeria can occur in any food, and so the food hygiene is really the most important message, as opposed to the actual foods themselves.
Excellent. And in terms of the foods that are slightly higher risk, those ones sort of that have the qualities that you've described, you know, for example, I have a list on my website of things that are generally a bit more risky. Are there other resources that women can sort of access to look at? Is this something that's safe for me to eat or not?
Yeah. So the most reliable list is the FSANZ website, which is the Food
Great.
Standards Authority of Australia and New Zealand.
Yep.
That's really the people who set the Australian rules, and all of their do's and don'ts are research based.
Yeah.
And if you look at the research, the riskiest food in Australia is ham. So if you're going to stay away from one food, ham would be it.
Excellent advice, Melanie. Flipping onto the other side of things, so women wanting to say, what should I be eating in pregnancy? Again, I suspect you're going to, you know, encourage women to individualize what they eat based on their, you know, particular pregnancy needs. But what sort of foods are very important for a woman to be including in her pregnancy diet?
Yeah. Yes, we do individualize, but at the same time, you're right in that there are some general foods and eating patterns that make a really big difference.
Right.
So if I can start out by giving a few little key messages here. The first one
Brilliant.
that I think it's really important for couples to know is this concept of early life nutrition, or it's also known as the first 1,000 days or genetic programming. And it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, and is one of the main reasons why I specialize in this area. And what that means is that what the research has found is that essentially what a couple eats in the lead up to conception, what a woman eats during pregnancy, and what we feed our little ones in the first couple of years of life actually impacts genetic programming to a greater effect than what even your genes do as a couple, to impact the genetic programming of the baby's genes to determine things like their risk of chronic diseases, their immunity, their likelihood of struggling with their weight in the future, their brain development and problem solving abilities, all these different things. So this is why I am so passionate about this topic, and why I think that nutrition, like every couple should be having at least one consultation with a dietitian during this first 1,000 days, because it does make such a difference.
Right.
The second thing is that as much as we can encourage people to eat really healthily during pregnancy, it's a really hard time to eat well. And I find that so many people go into pregnancy with the intention to eat really healthily, but then they're overwhelmed with morning sickness and nausea, and then they have terrible reflux and constipation. They're exhausted, and so have no energy to cook or shop or those things. So I think we have to be really realistic as well. So, but at the same time, there are plenty of clever things that we can do. So I always like to, I guess, walk through the journey with my mums and see what type of struggles they're having, and then come up with some really practical solutions to help them eat as healthily as they can to give their baby the best head start in life, but also keeping in mind the hurdles that they're facing.
Definitely.
So in terms of an ideal diet, it's pretty much what we all know. And I always say, think about the ideal diet that you would give to your daughter. And that's really what you should be eating. So we want to be eating plenty of fruits and veggies. We want to be having some healthy lean proteins and some healthy fats in the diet. We want to be having some dairy, and we want to be having plenty of whole grains.
Right.
So if you want a couple of specific examples, though,
that'd be excellent.
Is that I find a lot of mums crave carbs during pregnancy, particularly in that first trimester. And when you actually look at the dietary guidelines for pregnancy, most of like the main foods that we actually need to increase during pregnancy to meet our pregnancy requirements are carbohydrate-based foods. So there's a reason why you're craving carbs, but look for healthy carbs. So instead of going for hot chips, choose things like a corn on the cob, or a quinoa, extra quinoa salad or a quinoa
Yep.
stir fry or something along those lines. So
Sure.
yeah, just be a bit creative.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lost on my earphone, sorry. So that's excellent advice. What about for women who have dietary modifications? So women who are vegetarian or vegan or pescatarian, what's your advice to them?
Yeah. Well, I guess no different than anybody else in that I think every mum should be seeing a dietitian during pregnancy. But obviously, if you've got special dietary requirements, then you're going to need to modify your diet to suit those requirements. So, for example, with a vegan diet, there are some key nutrients that we're going to need to be even more careful of for our vegan mums. So things like B12 and omega-3 and choline and iron and calcium. And so we really need to, and zinc as well. So we really need to be looking for those and like intentionally looking for them. So that means getting some blood tests, but there's also some of those nutrients that you can't test for with a blood test. And so that's where we really need to be looking at your diet to make sure that you are meeting those requirements through either diet or supplements.
Great, excellent. And I sort of just mentioned pescatarian women at the end there. I get a lot of questions about fish in pregnancy. Is there too much fish? Do I need to worry? Which sort of fish should I be eating? Can you give us a little summary of, how much fish women should be having? And do you recommend fish oil supplements, omega-3 supplements for women in pregnancy as well?
Yeah. So I believe that fish is a really great food to be eating during pregnancy. And I'm always sad to see the research that shows that that generally women's fish intake decreases during pregnancy because of that early life nutrition and because of the research that shows the impact on preterm birth and baby's brain development and all these other great things. It's the most important time ever to be getting enough omega-3 in your diet. And fish is by far, like seriously, by a long way, the best source of omega-3. So, excuse me. So I do want to see mums eating fish during pregnancy, but you just have to be a bit savvy about which fish and how it's prepared. So we obviously, first of all, need to consider listeria. So your fish needs to be well cooked. So no sashimi and those types of things pregnancy. And then we
have plenty of patients who sort of straight after giving birth have someone bring in a sashimi platter. It seems to be a common request.
Oh, dear. It's funny how whenever we're not allowed to have something, it's always what we want.
Definitely.
And then in terms of mercury, we need to be staying away from large amounts of large fish. So the recommendations, like if you're having fish 2 to 3 times a week during pregnancy, that is enough to meet your omega-3 requirements if it is omega-3 rich fish, and B, it's not going to cause you mercury toxicity unless you're again eating really large fish. So to be a bit more practical, probably the biggest problem when it comes to fish tends to be from the fish and chip shop, flake. Flake is actually shark, so it's not fish, but being a large source, it has more mercury than other fish. So if somebody's eating fish and chips from the fish and chip shop or eating flake from the fish and chip shop a couple of times a week, that's going to be, or even once a week, that could potentially be problematic. Saying that, I think I've had 2 cases of mercury toxicity in my career of nearly 20 years as a dietitian. And both of them were men. And
there you go. I was going to say, I've not seen it in a pregnant woman, I must say.
Yeah, and both of them were because they had severe food allergies and intolerances, and so literally ate fish every day, if not every meal of every day. So it's not nearly as big an issue as you think, and the benefits of eating fish far outweigh the risks. It's just more if you are living in a family whereby where you do have a fish every meal, then you need to be aware of it.
Excellent.
So in terms of fish oil supplements, if you can't eat fish for some reason or don't like it or what have you, or can't get in enough omega-3, then I definitely recommend supplements. But if you can get it through your diet, even better.
Brilliant. Excellent. My next question is about diet throughout the pregnancy. So, you know, as you've said, ideally women sort of gain more of their weight towards the end of a pregnancy. A lot of that relates to the fetal size and development as well. But should a woman be changing her diet throughout the pregnancy to try and meet those different weight targets, or for other nutritional purposes as well? Or is sort of the diet that you recommend at the beginning of the pregnancy the same one that carries right through?
So there are certainly changes throughout the pregnancy, mainly based on micronutrient requirements. So, for example, if women are taking high doses, like very high doses of folic acid in their first trimester, I'll often recommend that they cease them at the end of the first trimester. So things like that. But saying that, I think the main reason for changing a diet throughout pregnancy is different side effects of pregnancy. So usually what women can tolerate and a craving in the first trimester is usually very different than the second trimester, which is very different than the third trimester. So that seems to have a much bigger impact. But yes, micronutrient is still definitely a consideration.
Excellent. Fantastic. Now, a question that I get all the time, because every woman is afraid of developing gestational diabetes. What sort of diet is ideal really through the whole pregnancy, in the lead up to their glucose tolerance test? And how quickly can they change their diet to reduce their risk of having diabetes? You know, is one donut the day before your GTT going to cause you to have an elevated glucose tolerance test? What sort of diet, and for how long prior to testing should it all be implemented?
Yeah, so I get that question a lot as well, in terms of, if I eat this one wrong food, is that going to mean that I'm not going to fall pregnant, or is that going to mean that I've ruined my baby? No and no. Like,
Agreed.
I very much believe in the 80-20 rule. So we want to eat as healthily as we can the majority of the time. But nobody's perfect, not even dietitians. And so, you know,
nor obstetricians, let me tell you.
So, we just want to do the best that we possibly can. And so one donut the day before your glucose tolerance test is not going to make any difference at all. So whether or not you get gestational diabetes is predominantly caused by your progesterone levels that impact upon your insulin. So it's mainly hormonal, but certainly the research does show that if you have gained too much body weight throughout pregnancy, that's probably the second biggest impact. So so optimizing your weight management throughout pregnancy is really valuable. And then on top of that, there is good research to show that having particularly those good fats throughout your pregnancy can make a difference as well. So not eating too many of the bad saturated fats and having plenty of those good nutritious fats that we get from foods, avocado and fish and nuts, and extra virgin olive oil can really help as well.
Brilliant. Excellent. And for women that are unlucky enough to get gestational diabetes, what are the sort of main dietary modifications that you recommend that enable them to, obviously with other lifestyle measures like increasing their exercise, try to avoid medical treatment like insulin?
Yeah. So because by the time people have developed gestational diabetes, usually it depends a little bit on the client, but often I will actually like to do some carbohydrate counting. So helping people to learn how much carbohydrate is in food, and really managing their carbohydrate intake throughout the day. So one of the most common things that I see with working mums is them only eating 2, maybe 3 times throughout the day. Whereas I really love to see pregnant mums eating every 3 to 5 hours and having a small amount of carbohydrates along with some protein or fat, to just so that you don't get those carbohydrate spikes, and really having that really even distribution of carbohydrates throughout the day, and making sure that you're not getting those big spikes of carbs. And then there's some sort of basic things around making sure you're having enough veggies and having those good fats and all of those types of things as well. But that's probably my number one thing, is looking at people's carbohydrate intake for helping to reduce risk of insulin. But mums also need to remember that sometimes you can do everything right and have the perfect diet, and it's still, because it's hormonal, you still end up on insulin, and you shouldn't feel guilty for that. And in fact, I would also say that so many mums that I see actually say that as much as they were upset about their diagnosis, it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to them, because they take their diet so much more seriously, and they learn so much more about nutrition throughout their pregnancy, because they come and actually is an instigator for them to go and see a dietitian. And so they learn so much more. So I guess, again, I would love preventing that by seeing a dietitian way before you get to that gestational stage.
And I suppose also that carries them in such great stead for the rest of their lives. The sort of knowledge that they gain during pregnancy, they can continue to utilize once they've had their baby as well, and just remain healthy, which is really great.
I had one client, as an example, who came to see me with gestational diabetes for her first baby. And obviously it was towards the end of her pregnancy. She was carrying a lot of excess body weight. And so we helped her manage her gestational diabetes. But then she continued to come to see me after her pregnancy, and we got her weight down, and she got pregnant again not long after. And was still overweight going into this second pregnancy. And then the second pregnancy, she actually continued to lose weight throughout her second pregnancy. Completely transformed her diet. Didn't get gestational diabetes, which is actually rare for people who have had PD, that they have a chance of getting it second time round. And then went on to just to completely change the way that she ate, that then impacted upon her children's diet as well. And brilliant. So, it can really make a difference.
Fantastic. So good. Talking about impacting upon a child's diet, my next question is one that I've had from a few people wanting to know tonight. And I want to know from you whether or not there is any sort of evidence or research that suggests that what you eat, or what a pregnant woman eats during her pregnancy, impacts upon the risk of her baby developing food allergies.
Yes, is the short answer. Very much.
Tell me more.
So there's a few different things. So first of all, and probably the key message that we're trying to get out there at the moment, is that it's really important to be eating allergens throughout your pregnancy, because that helps to build up your baby's immune tolerance. So particularly if you or the baby's dad has any type of history of eczema, asthma, or food allergies, this information is very important for them. And then whatever, particularly if they have a food allergy, what type of food allergies run in your family, they're the most important allergens to be focusing on. So say, for example, your baby's dad had some peanut anaphylaxis when he was little, or allergy when he was little, then you definitely want to be trying to eat peanuts throughout your pregnancy. And the current advice is, if possible, 2 to 3 times a week. It might be that maybe he had an egg allergy when he was little. So same thing, try to have some eggs 2 to 3 times a week throughout your pregnancy if you can. So there's a list of 7 to 8 common allergens, and I mean, if in an ideal world you would have all of them throughout your pregnancy on a regular basis, do the best that you can.
As long as you're not allergic yourself.
That's right. As long as you're not allergic yourself, and you're going to cause problems. So those key allergens tend to be eggs, wheat, peanuts, other tree nuts, which is separate than than peanuts.
Yeah.
Seafood, soy, fish. I'm testing myself here. And one more. Oh, and cow's milk.
Excellent.
Cow's
Got
milk.
there.
Yeah, so that's the first key message. The
Yeah.
second, there's a few things. So the second thing that you can do, again, is the omega-3. So the more omega-3 that you have in your diet through, well, not the more, but having adequate omega-3 in your diet really helps to reduce risk of allergies. Thirdly, adequate vitamin D. And then fourthly is optimizing your gut microbiome, because you're sharing your gut microbiome with your baby's gut microbiome. And so there are actually even some nutritional supplements probiotics that emerging research is starting to suggest can make a difference. So if I have a mum whose baby has a high risk of allergies and intolerances, I'll often put them onto some probiotics as well.
Brilliant. Excellent. You mentioned vitamin D, and I'm going to bring you back to that for a second, because it's sort of I think it has been the flavor of the month in medicine for quite a long time now. Everyone's very focused on vitamin D. As a dietitian, from your perspective, what are the main sort of advantages from both sort of maternal and fetal perspectives of having a replete vitamin D level?
Oh, look, so many advantages.
Yep.
And it was interesting. My understanding was that there was a big working party a couple of years ago looking into vitamin D during pregnancy to consider whether it should be put onto the guidelines of a standard nutritional supplement for all mums. And it was decided against. And I think the main reason is that if you have high vitamin D levels, you can actually increase your risk again of food allergies. So there's very much a U-shaped curve. Low vitamin D increases your risk of food allergies, but high vitamin D increases the risk of food allergies as well.
Interesting.
So you want to have the right amount. And down here in Victoria, pretty much every client I see,
every single patient of mine. Same here. Yeah.
But I think it's probably more those, Queensland sunny states and Darwin and so forth that
definitely.
That are more likely to have high vitamin D. But I'm often surprised at, obviously not you, Scott, but at how often I see clients who they had a vitamin D of 17 4 years ago, and their doctor put them on one tablet of 1,000 international units a day, and they're still taking that 1,000 international units a day 4 years later, and they had it tested and it's still 17, and it's just, and the doctor still hasn't increased their vitamin D levels, and I'm like, hey, you're pregnant now. Definitely. It's time, we're going to get those vitamin D levels up. So
100% agree. It seems an obvious thing to do.
And it's such a cheap supplement and so easy. So I highly recommend checked and getting them.
Brilliant. Excellent. The next sort of few questions I have are a bit more specific and relate to sort of subgroups of women or those with particular symptoms. And I want to know how these women can modify their diets to make their pregnancies easier, or to sort of relieve these symptoms. So one is heartburn. So a lot of women get bad heartburn in pregnancy, and often I end up needing to medicate patients to sort of relieve their symptom completely. But what foods are your no-nos in terms of sort of, making heartburn worse?
Well, first of all, I just have to tell you that I read this paper the other day. I found absolutely fascinating, that I had never even heard of before. It was a study into the wives' tale that if you have heartburn, that your baby is more likely to be born with a full head of hair.
Yes.
And the research actually came back saying that there was a significant correlation. I thought that was fascinating.
I've always believed it as an old wives' tale, as you say, but I have not read that research.
I thought that was really interesting.
Unbelievable. There you go.
So there are some really practical things that you can do, like not eating too close to going to bed. And then pushing yourself up with a few little pillows and things when you're lying down. So some things like that. Not eating really spicy foods or too much caffeine are obvious things that you can do. But probably one of the biggest things that I find makes a difference is a glass of milk. So recently, and it's amazing how often, again, if I can give you another case study that just stands out in my mind, this wasn't a pregnant client, but it was a client who came to see me with reflux, and their GP had told them to go to cut out all dairy and gluten and wheat, and to start Nexium. And I said, well, just before you try all that, how about you just try having a glass of milk after dinner before bed for me for 2 weeks and see what came back and goes, my reflux is fixed.
Done.
You saved yourself all of those
absolutely scripts, definitely
consequences, and all the difficulties of trying to go out to eat and avoiding gluten and avoiding this and avoiding that, and
absolutely
fix.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
So it's because of the pH of the dairy, but it can be a really simple fix for some people. And also making sure that your meals aren't too big, which is a really big one in pregnancy. So because you've got your baby sitting there, it can make it quite difficult. Like that's often the cause of the reflux. And so by having more regular meals can make a really, really big difference.
Excellent. Brilliant. And another very troubling symptom for a lot of women, I find particularly in the first trimester and then often again sort of towards the end of pregnancy, is constipation. So, I have a little cocktail of foods and other things that I sort of recommend. But as a dietitian, what foods do you recommend as being best to sort of alleviate constipation?
Yeah. Well, I think the basics where we start with is always the 3 Fs: fiber, fluid, and fitness. So so first of all, we want to make sure that you are getting enough fiber in your diet. And you have to remember that during pregnancy, your fiber requirements actually increase. So you need more fiber than usual. And particularly if mums have got a lot of nausea, fibrous foods are sometimes foods that they're avoiding. So we do need to making sure that you're getting enough fiber in your diet. Secondly, fluid. I find over and over again that mums aren't getting enough fluid during their pregnancy, and it really solves so many problems during pregnancy. So you really have to drink so much more water during pregnancy than you do normally. And yes, I know it means that you're going to pee more, but it's just
going to happen anyway.
That's right. So it makes a really big difference. And then the fitness. So that little bit of physical activity can make a big difference. And then there are actually some probiotics again that are specific for constipation, which I would use in some situations. I might use some some aperients or some fiber supplements in some clients as well. But the other thing I was going to say is to have a look. Probably the most common thing is to have a look at the amount of iron that you're taking in your supplements, because iron is constipating, and if you don't need that iron, then get rid of it.
Excellent advice. Really, really good. The next thing I'm going to ask about, and I won't keep you too much longer because Grace has done incredibly well for the last 45 minutes, but I'm sure she's ready. Perfect. Well done. Not your first rodeo. Very sort of topical at the moment and quite controversial is advice about caffeine intake in pregnancy. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit controversial with that because there was a controversial research paper that came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, that's why I ask.
That said that even though the current guidelines are to have less than 200 milligrams of caffeine a day, that this particular author of the paper recommended that we should change the guidelines to be saying don't have caffeine during pregnancy. I tend to agree with that. And again, if you're having a little bit occasionally, it's not the end of the world. But I think that if we focus more on not having it, then mums are going to actually meet those less than 200 milligram guidelines. Whereas it's really easy to go over those 200 milligram guidelines, most people aren't actually measuring the size of their coffees and how much caffeine is in the particular coffee beans that they're using, and all of those types of things. Particularly if you're in Melbourne, we've got all these amazing coffee shops. A lot of them are quite concentrated coffee beans. So yeah, I think that it's safer to aim for none, and then if you have a little bit, then so be it. So it's not the end of the world. Again, if you have one coffee, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a carriage, but no. I think it makes more sense to aim for none. Yeah, and there's a lot of benefits, not only in terms of decreasing risk of miscarriage and decreasing risk of small for gestational age babies and things like that, but also in terms of your iron intake. So we need to remember that caffeine, it decreases iron absorption, which your iron requirements increase significantly during pregnancy, and you're much better off getting iron from your diet than you are from supplements, because as we said, supplements constipate you. They also increase the risk of gestational diabetes, increase risk of a whole lot of different GI symptoms. So really you want to be trying to optimize your iron intake through pregnancy as much as possible.
Great, excellent. I'm going to move on to sort of the end of the pregnancy journey, and we're talking about women who are now trying to breastfeed, and how important is diet. And obviously this is a really challenging time for a lot of women. They are not, they're exhausted. They've been through a lot physically. They've given birth. It's a very emotional time for a lot of women. It's a really difficult time to be focusing on diet. But how much does diet impact upon one's ability to breastfeed well? And do you recommend in women who are trying to breastfeed, are there any certain things that they can do to help their supply and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, great. So I think probably the first most important key message would be fluid intake again. So we have to remember that the majority of breast milk is actually fluid, and so if you're dehydrated, that actually has a significant impact on on your volume of breast milk and your milk production. So that would be number one thing. Secondly, is not dieting and making sure that you are getting the calories that you need to be able to provide for your milk supply. I find that after pregnancy, so many mums, their mind switches straight away to how can I lose this pregnancy weight as quickly as possible, because they've seen all of the stories in the magazines saying that this celebrity lost all of their pregnancy weight in 6 weeks and is now wearing a bikini, and so every mom thinks that they need to do the same thing, and it can have a really big impact upon your milk supply. So give yourself more time, like give yourself 6 months to a year to lose your pregnancy weight, and it doesn't mean that I want women to be gaining weight while they're breastfeeding, which I do sometimes see as well. But when you're breastfeeding, you're actually like exclusively breastfeeding, you're burning 2,000 kilojoules on average a day, which, to put that into perspective, is like going for a 2-hour walk a day, or going for like a 45-minute run. And again, it depends on your weight and all of those types of things, but definitely it's a fair few calories that you're burning through breastfeeding. And so it's the equivalent for most people to lose 0.5 kilogram of body weight a week by not changing anything except for breastfeeding.
Wow, unbelievable.
So
excellent. Brilliant, good advice. And I'm going to ask you one last question if you've got time, and it's sort of a very big broad question. It could probably take up another hour. So sort of your tips for women who are trying to conceive. So, if you had to list a few top tips for women who are trying to conceive, a fertility diet, I don't know if there is such a thing in your mind, but what should women who are trying to get pregnant, either naturally or going through fertility treatment, be doing in terms of their diet to give themselves the best chance of conception?
The reason why I giggle, Scott, is because much as I'm passionate about the whole first 1,000 days, fertility is probably my real thing. Like, it's my real passion.
Right. Excellent. Well, I'm glad we got there tonight.
So, yeah, I have a YouTube channel called Nourish with Melanie.
Great.
And
Excellent.
and it has over 100 videos, which are all evidence-based. They're all about 5 minutes long, so not very long
Amazing.
to consume,
Yeah.
on a whole range of common questions to do with
Yeah.
trying to conceive, reproductive
Yeah.
conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, and pregnancy and new mums. And so
Brilliant.
there's loads of things in there that people can,
Yeah.
can go and see about trying to conceive.
Amazing. What did you say the channel was called again? Nourish with Melanie, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Excellent. Yep. Fantastic.
Yeah. So if I was going to choose just a couple of things for trying to conceive,
yeah.
Where to start? So look, I'm going to go back and do a bit of a full circle, and
Great.
just go back to that, like the good fats make such a huge difference. So we have to, I always say that the egg and the sperm, they're providing the genetic material for your baby.
Yep.
So
yep.
you do want to be having a really healthy diet for preferably at least 3 months before conception.
Yep.
And those decreasing inflammation is one of the best things that you can do to optimize both your egg health and also the receptivity of your uterus and the likelihood of implantation. So with the fluid around the follicle, so of the egg before it matures, if that's inflamed, then that's going to impact the DNA of the egg to have a significant impact on the health of the egg and therefore the likelihood of conception. So having those really good fats and that really good fat profile, and to put it into perspective, a true Mediterranean diet has a fat rate, a good to bad fat ratio of around 1:1. The typical Western diet has a fat ratio of 18:1.
Wow.
So we just don't have enough good fats and we have way too many bad fats. And so I think, like, it impacts your egg health and it impacts that ability to implant, because again, if you've got too much inflammation, that really has a big impact on implantation of the embryo as well.
Definitely.
So.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Madden. As I say, I know it's a huge question, and I think the best thing people can do is to go to your YouTube channel, and I suspect Zoe's just popped it down there for people to actually go to, which is great. But certainly, you know, as we spoke about earlier today, I think preconception care is a really critical time in the pregnancy journey, and I couldn't encourage it highly enough. I like to meet patients if possible before they're pregnant, because, as you say, it really sets things up for a very, very healthy pregnancy. So I am so grateful for your time tonight. Thank you for persisting and for bringing Grace with you rather than abandoning altogether. I'm really, really grateful. How can people access your care and help? What's the best way for people to do that?
Oh, so actually that just reminded me. So when we were talking about fertility before, I was going to say, so I have a free fertility meal plan and a free pregnancy meal plan that people can download.
Brilliant.
So the free fertility meal plan is just melaniemcgrice.com/fertility, and the free pregnancy meal plan is melaniemcgrice.com/pregnancy. So
easy.
So hopefully they're easy. So that's a good starting place. And then you'll be able to get access to all my contact details and things. I'm pretty easy to find, so people can either message me on Instagram, or she's snoring now. Sorry. Message me on Instagram.
You're not going to want to move for the next hour for fear of waking her up.
Fine now. Message me on Instagram. If you just, my website is simply Melanie McGrice, so you can reach out there. You can contact me through my YouTube channel, just whatever suits. Here to help. So
brilliant. And I will share this video as well, and I'll tag you in it, so hopefully all of my followers have access to your wonderful help as well. Well, thank you so much again. I'm incredibly grateful, and I think this has been such a useful talk for all women who are trying to conceive and those who are pregnant, and I hope that you see a lot of my patients for me, because I think that, this will lead to them having a wonderfully healthy outcome for their pregnancy. So thank you so much again. And I look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Scott. Have a great
Have
evening.
a good night. Take care. Bye. Bye. Bye.